कि मम्मी का टीवी थोड़ा कम कर
Namaskar.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning to everyone. The world is organizing 22nd March as World Water Day. The UN has announced groundwater making the invisible visible as theme of this year's World Water Day. Matching with the global perspective of making groundwater visible to stakeholders, Haryana is also taking some steps in this direction. Today, Atal Bhujal Yojana Haryana is organizing this webinar. This webinar topic is groundwater governance in Haryana, possibilities and challenges. On my behalf and on behalf of SPMU Haryana, I welcome you all in this webinar. We have been joined by Honorable Mrs. Keshni Anand Arora, ex-Chief Secretary, Government of Haryana and Chairperson HWRA. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
We have been also joined by Dr. Satbir Singh Kadian, EIC, Irrigation and Water Sources Department, Government of Haryana, and Project Director, Atal Bhujal Haryana. I welcome you, sir. We have been also joined by our special guests for today, the technical speakers, Mr. Pratul Saxena, Director, NPMU, Government of India, Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni, Executive Director, ACWADAM, Dr. Dipanker Saha, former member, Central Groundwater Board. I welcome you all in this webinar. Our TSA team, DPMU teams, DIP members, and other participants from different sections have also joined. I welcome you all. Through this webinar, we will be trying to understand from our distinguished guests about the potential challenges, probable possibilities, and institutional risks in the context of Haryana to achieve the global goal of sustainable development. Again, and at the end, I just want to say a few words. A different live in the future, a drop of water is living for good, threatened by pollution and heat. Humanity exploits nature's resources beyond regeneration. A bird driven fell dead, thirsty on the fields. With this, I request Mr. Pratik, IC expert, to take up agenda ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to set the context for today's webinar and set the skeleton for the discussion ahead that we are on way forward during this webinar. It is for the first time in the history of the contemporary water governance that groundwater is taking the central stage. UN Water vouching for it on the World Water Day is a testimony of the same. It is an established fact that globally water economy is heavily dependent on groundwater. At the same time, it is also known that groundwater resources are depleting drastically. Undoubtedly, India is at the epicenter in both the cases. The pioneers in the water governance domain agrees that groundwater is a common pool resource. That implies that it can only be managed through collective action, or in other words, only through the equitable participation of all stakeholders. Sustainable groundwater governance can be attended. If we wish to manage the common pool resource through collective action, then it is a bare minimum to know the resource in its all horizons. And that takes us to this year's World Water Day theme, that is making the invisible visible. At a local level, the pattern in groundwater availability, its utility, its extraction, its variations, and its quality should be known and known to all. And that defines the Atal Bhujal Yojana, a decentralized effort for participatory groundwater management in India. In the past 2 decades, India has covered an essential journey to make groundwater visible to all. That includes the National Aquifer Mapping and Management Program, that is NACUM of Central Groundwater Board, also disclosing periodic groundwater information in the public domain through WRIS VARIS, and also INGRESS, that is India Groundwater Resource Estimation System. The civil societies and non-government organizations had also made some significant efforts to attain the endeavor. One of them was the Pgwm Consortium. that is participatory groundwater management consortium anchored by Pgwm Foundation in collaboration with ACWADAM, People Science Institute, Vasan Hyderabad, and ACT Bhuj. The Pgwm Consortium had practiced the principle of participatory groundwater management on the ground and created successful pilots across the country. Accumulation of these government and non-government organization efforts significantly contributed to the framing of Atal Bhujal Yojana, what we are leading and implementing across the country in the 7 states at this moment. As Mr. Jain mentioned, today's webinar is focused on groundwater governance in Haryana with contours within the contours of possibilities and challenges. Most of the Haryana lies over the alluvial aquifers, and that brings a factor of novelty in the prominent groundwater trajectory that we are riding over. Alluvial aquifers are significantly different from any other aquifer typology. Biophysical characteristics of resource unit, socio-economical conditions of users, geopolitical circumstances of state, and ecological concern of the geographical region put forth challenges in managing the alluvial aquifers. Alluvial aquifers exist in a contradictory but in an essential combination. For example, the resource unit is rich, but the resource is scarce. Relatively, the users are financially well, but heavily dependent upon the fragile water resources. The commodity is embedded by strong social nerves, but resource operation is heavily atmostic. In the geographies of alluvial aquifers, the groundwater is in the epicenter of utilization, but the management institutes are driven by the surface water mentality. And this altogether makes a very an accidental but a palatable cocktail. And that leaves us with many questions that we are looking forward to our technical speakers to address through this webinar. And with this, I invite Ma'am Keshni Anand Arora ji, Chairperson HWRA, to please deliver the opening address. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Pratik. Dr. Kadian, Mr. Pramod Jain, Dipanker ji, Pratul, Saxena ji, all the DIPs, the representatives of TSA, Pratik. It's my great privilege to be associated with the webinar on groundwater governance in Haryana, possibilities and challenges. Today, world is observing 22nd March as World Water Day. The theme is very important. It is groundwater making the invisible visible. It's very apparent that life would be impossible without groundwater, and we're not understanding it. Therefore, we need to value groundwater. Most of the arid areas of the world depend on the groundwater. And due to climate change, now rainfall pattern has become so erratic and skewed that is affecting the groundwater further. In fact, we require immediate action. And I think we need to make it very clear that it is an emergency. And this has to be handled at any cost. In fact, it requires enhanced monitoring interventions to mitigate against pressure from abstraction. It's important for the healthy functioning of the ecosystem. Now, what is more important is now the European buyers are also using the water footprint as benchmark or a parameter for deciding on trade. We lose all our exports if we don't sensitize our people for the water footprint. In fact, the textile industry also came, and wherever they are exporting, the water footprint is being asked even for the textile industry of the Panipat. These are very important issues, and we need to now emphasize on it. And earlier we do, better it is. So our goal is, our vision is to protect our groundwater from overexploitation and contamination. I take this opportunity to appreciate the efforts made by Atal Bhujal Yojana teams in awareness planning of water conservation in Haryana. I make special mention of Shri Davinder Singh, ACS Irrigation, Dr. Kadian, Mr. Pramod Jain, the TSA team, who have strategically planned and implemented Atal Bhujal Yojana. I'm impressed with the working of DIPs who are working with zeal and passion to achieve the goals in the field of water for sustainable development. I'm very happy to note that Haryana Water Resources Authority is closely associated with all the activities, and we are working very seriously on trying to make an impact on various aspects of water, especially groundwater. Though Haryana Water Resources Authority is dealing with all the surface, the treated, and the groundwater, but we're working special efforts for the groundwater. Now, what are the challenges before Haryana? These are very serious. Two major challenges that we face as we made a full map of the groundwater situation. One is the water depletion, and mainly in the areas of Ambala, Kurukshetra, Karnal, Panipat, Kathal, Fatehbad, Mahendragarh. I was also seeing the IIT study Kharagpur, and shockingly, the area along Ghaggar and even along Yamuna are having problems of water depletion, which is very, very serious. Then we deal with the problem, which is the second major problem, is the water logging and salinity. And most of the central Haryana suffers from it, especially Rohtak, Jhajjar, Sonipat. We've done a specific study of the survey and the study of the waterlogged areas. So this much, the problem is so serious that very big area is either water depleted or waterlogged and saline. So the groundwater governance is very, very important. What is it basically? It is the decision making on groundwater involving individual and or organized entities at various levels. It means promotion of responsible collective action to ensure socially sustainable and effective utilization of groundwater resources for the benefit of humankind and dependent ecosystems. The broad tenets of groundwater governance are what? Transparency, participation, information, custom, and rule of law. But the major pillar of good governance is accurate data and information. So what do we require? We require piezometers basically, which can provide us, and a portal which can provide us live data from agriculture side and from the industry side. Special piezometers are being set up under Atal Bhujal. We've requested government to set up more piezometers, and in the urban areas, we're requesting the urban municipal authorities to do so. The day we get the live data, it would sensitize the people. The data today is based on 2,200 piezometers that are from groundwater cell and CGWB. We need authentic data to make people realize what is happening. In fact, HWRA and Groundwater Cell of Irrigation Department, headed by Dr. Kadian, has worked towards providing data and information in the public domain on the basis of groundwater data. In fact, we categorized villages on the basis of depth to groundwater. In fact, it is different from the categorization of CGWB, and it's the first of its kind in India and has been appreciated by everyone. In fact, we categorized it on 7 basic parameters, and it is on the HWRA website. I don't want to give the details at this point, but shockingly, 1948 villages out around 7,000 are categorized as severely groundwater stressed, where depth to water range is between 30 meters and more. 1093 villages are categorized as moderately groundwater stressed villages, where depth to water range is between 20 to 30. Then these are 2 areas, the red and the pink, that are worrisome. Then the worrisome are the waterlogged. 333 villages are categorized as potential waterlogged villages, where depth to water table is 1.51 to 3.0 meters. And 88 villages are categorized as severely waterlogged, where depth to water table is 0 to 1.5 meter. And with salinity, it's a serious issue. A day will come where we will have a real serious problem, and it would affect our food security. It would affect our drinking water capabilities, and we need to rise. We need to be very serious about it and treat it as a very important emergency. The second part of the governance would be the decision making on management of groundwater on the basis of groundwater and aquifer data. In fact, as I told you, this categorization is not on the basis of blocks, on the basis of this tiniest unit, that is villages, and different from CGWB. So the decision making, it is meant for policies, it is meant for focusing attention. Considering the financial constraints every government has, we need to concentrate on where to focus. And it has to be on the basis of groundwater and aquifer data. The relationship between groundwater extraction and recharge depends on aquifers which are tapped by wells, tubewells, and borewells. The fundamental basis for good groundwater management is clear understanding of aquifers. And we need to systematically work on this relationship. There's a need for decision support system with emphasis on holistic approach rather than ad hoc decision-making and implementation. Multidisciplinary studies supported by reliable data on aquifer system and aquifer-based community-centric groundwater management are needed. We have to identify area where surface water can replace groundwater. I really congratulate Irrigation Department and HSVP for planning, the surface water for the Panipat industry. And in fact, already the pondage was available and it was not being used. And they have now started with the intervention of CPS and Dr. Kadian and Mr. Joshi. Now the Panipat industry is using surface water to that extent and avoiding the groundwater. These are very important interventions. Similarly, in the districts of Kurukshetra, Karnal, Khatar, even surface water is available and they are not using it, and they're using groundwater. That means sensitization is very important. We need to see reasons why they are using groundwater, why are water channels not available. In fact, ADC is working very seriously, and the Irrigation Department to go into the causes. I had a very specific meeting in Karnal on this issue and Kurukshetra on this issue, and we need to work on systematically changing the surface water. We have to catch the rain, as Prime Minister said. These are very important issues which we need to work on. In fact, the good point is the Prime Minister and our Chief Minister, Mr. Manola ji, are particularly focused on water issues. This is the right time for all experts to work and bring about results. Your contribution matters to all of us. The institutional management of local water user associations for governing their use of shared water resources is the need of the day. The collective groundwater management is quite challenging to implement, but it's the only way for equitable, effective, efficient, sustainable groundwater management. In fact, Pani Panchayats, the village and sanitation committees are working very hard. And in fact, some of the cattle in charge and many other in charges of these Pani Panchayats are working very hard. But then we need to consolidate all the efforts and work on it. A multidisciplinary approach involving various departments with participatory community approach can bring about the desired results. HWRA is working very hard to coordinate all the efforts so that there is no ad hocism. There is a holistic approach to the system. The regulatory system can be effective, but cannot replace the importance of participatory approach and general sensitization and awareness. HWRA is also spearheading the formulation of district water plans at the block level with water gap analysis, with emphasis on their Varshia plan for water recharging, conservation on the demand and the supply side. I'm aware of the fact the DIPs in Atal Bhujal are playing a very crucial role, assisting the districts in formulating such plans. These plans would facilitate convergence between groundwater management and various programs under implementation by Government of India and state government. Integrating policy and practice of groundwater management at the level of villages will be the major goal of the district authorities. Groundwater governance and management would require large-scale capacity building, data, knowledge of aquifer-based management. In fact, coming to small thing like water recharge structures, there are problems. The capacity building has to come in point. How to recharge the defunct wells. Honorable CM has been very considerate to give about 5,000 wells for the recharge. But then we have to decide how to do it. There are issues which may be discussed by the experts, whether a recharge of defunct wells is good for the ecosystem. Will that lead to some problems in areas? Then why not identify areas where there's not a problem? So these are issues where we would need experts to intervene. In fact, let us work systematically on aquifer mapping, using aquifers for recharge, identification, groundwater categorization, modeling, community dialogue, coordinating the role of formal agencies such as groundwater boards, groundwater cell, agriculture, public health department, irrigation department, electricity boards. Let us promote, protect, mitigate contamination of groundwater resources, where we have to involve the environment department along with good conservation and recharge practices. The strategies for groundwater depleted areas and those of waterlogged are different. The major strategies for groundwater depletion are micro irrigation, water recharge, diversion of water guzzling crops to low water consuming crops, with schemes such as Meri Pani, Meri Virasat, rooftop rainwater harvesting, recharge through defunct wells as proposed in the budget this year. The option of artificial recharge as a mitigation strategy should be guided by geomorphic setting, which is easier to map and is strongly linked to subsurface stratigraphy, as demonstrated by a study by IIT Kharagpur. In areas where agriculture is the most significant causal factor for the severe groundwater losses, reducing irrigation water demand must be a high priority in these areas. Today, it was a great news that CSSRI has come up with a pilot where you can use micro irrigation for paddy crop, which will save water. Let us use more pilots. Let's practice more and ensure either we change from paddy to other crops, or we ensure that the water usage is reduced. Water use efficiency is very, very important in these areas. Efforts towards demand supply and supply side has to be coordinated. The major strategies for waterlogging areas are subsurface drainage, micro irrigation, salt tolerant crops, afforestation, fisheries, a conjunctive use of fresh and saline water, restricting flood irrigation. There's a need to plan conjunctive management of surface and groundwater and address water energy nexus in developing groundwater governance in respect to tackling what Shah has said, groundwater anarchy. In fact, if land is different to every individual, the water cannot come, the water usage, the water right cannot come along with the land right. Let water be common pool to be managed and strategically used. Since groundwater is a common pool resource, regulation, resource allocation, decision making at every level is important. It requires participation that enables the integration of democratic principles of representation, transparency, and accountability at every level of governance. Gandhiji rightly said, The earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but a loan from our children. So we have to hand over to them, at least as was handed over to us. Thank you very much. Thanks to the Atal Bhujal team, Dr. Kadian, to Irrigation Department, Pratik, and all others for giving me this opportunity. And thank you for listening to me. So great of you. Thank you very much. Let us save water. That's more important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for this very well argued, very well articulated, and very much descriptive note on like in your opening address. That definitely set in a very right tone for the today's webinar. And with this, now we will move to our technical speakers. And there is a slight change in the earlier like mentioned or the earlier like noticed sequencing and our agenda. Now Dr. Dipanker Saha will go first. So before Dr. Saha will start, I will just give a very quick brief about Dr. Saha. Dr. Dipanker Saha was former member Central Groundwater Board, and currently like one distinction on his name is he is like one who argues around all the I will say aquifer system in the countries very well and particularly onto the new paradigm that we are trying to write, that is the demand side articulation or demand side management. He's one of the I will say legend who argues on this thing into all the institutional and management framework. With this, I request Dr. Dipanker Saha to please come and give his address. Sir, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratik. Respected Madam Keshni, Anand, Arora, and all dignitaries who are present. It's really wonderful to hear you, Madam. You have touched upon all the chords. You missed nothing. And
thank you. I learned from all of you.
And we who have spent life with sort of groundwater, we really pleased to hear such type of conversation that the top bureaucrats, the top policymakers, they are understanding the issues, understanding the complexities of the groundwater system. It's not like that a tank is put underground and you extract water as much as you like. There will be volumetric problem, there will be quality problem, there will be social problem, there will be engineering problem, like there can be land subsidence also. That has been reported recently from Delhi in one of the top journal in Nature Geoscience. So there can be a host of collateral problem besides volumetric and the quality problem. You have rightly pointed out that we must understand the aquifer holistically. That is very important, madam, because particularly in the alluvial aquifer system, there can be multi-layered aquifer. So one particular aquifer is being exploited and you are maybe taking intervention for artificial recharge in a different aquifer. So all your effort, your money, your time will go haywire if you don't understand the aquifer system in a holistic manner. And then you have rightly mentioned about the recharge of the well. You know, we have done the National Aquifer Mapping Program. I was privileged to lead the National Aquifer Mapping Program as a national coordinator. We did a wonderful study in Kurukshetra district, and that has been presented with our Secretary, Sri Shashi Shekhar Saab, in the PMO also. In that, we have shown them the limiting value of artificial recharge. You know, where the stage of groundwater development is 350 or 400%, the extent of groundwater scarcity is so much gigantic that with all your effort of artificial recharge and rainwater harvesting, you can improve at best by 20 to 30%. So the answer lies in the demand side intervention. So demand side intervention like crop diversification, like increasing the irrigation efficiency, then better agronomic practice, that are also very important, and we often forget them because artificial recharge and rainwater harvesting has got a visibility and it can be done immediate. But madam, where the extent of groundwater overexploitation is very high, like in Karnataka, like in say Gujarat, in Rajasthan, there we must emphasize on the demand side intervention. But in recharge also, as you were mentioning that whether the defunct well can be used for artificial recharge, the quality is a very important factor in such cases. You see, there are a lot of arguments throughout India in the academics and also in the professional organizations that are we spoiling our shallow aquifers? The shallow aquifers are lifeline of India, particularly when we consider the rural water supply. The shallow aquifers are lifeline of India. So we are, in the name of artificial recharge, say in the name of not so complete implementation of Swachh Bharat, whether the shallow aquifer is becoming contaminated. So you must take proper care in the quality aspect when we go for artificial recharge, because we must remember that our overland flow is heavily charged with pesticides and with fertilizer. So, Madam, now today, to all the distinguished gathering, I would like to place a small study that we have taken up in the Haryana state. Since Central Groundwater Board is doing the groundwater resource assessment since long, but the overexploitation of Haryana, Punjab, Western Uttar Pradesh and adjoining Punjab of Pakistan was highlighted internationally really in 2009 when a paper by Rodel came into the Nature with the application of the GRACE satellite, microgravity satellite. They identified that the most severe groundwater stressed area lies in this part of India. This Haryana, Punjab, Western Uttar Pradesh and adjoining Pakistan, adjoining Punjab in Pakistan. Then there was a flurry of research and a lot of researches, academic researches, professional activities, report writing that is going on. And if you see from 2004 to 2020, in 2004, 48% of the blocks in Haryana were overexploited. 2009, it rose to 59% of the blocks. 2011, 61% of the blocks. 2013, 54%. 2017, 61%. 2020, 60%. So the stage of groundwater development, though it is increasing marginally, and I will show you that there is some sign of improvement after 2017, but the overexploited blocks are not reverting back to semi-critical or safe. That is a really challenging work, because the extent of overexploitation is so acute. It is not that the overexploitation is only 110%. It is somewhere in 200%, 250, 300, 350%. So it's a really challenge. But at the same time, I would say that the situation is not that gloomy. There are some good signs that is coming up, even in the state of Haryana and Punjab and Western Uttar Pradesh, with the government intervention and the academia and the researchers. They must know that government interventions are not always futile. It is also working. So a small study that has been taken up in the rice growing area covering the 9 districts. They are Ambala, Jamunanagar, Kurukshetra, Kaithal, Karnal, Jind, Panipat, Sonipat and Fatehabad. They are contiguous districts in the northern part of Haryana, predominantly paddy cultivation, and whoever works with groundwater overexploitation, they blame paddy, that because it is a water guzzling crop, it takes a lot of water. So paddy is the responsible for groundwater overexploitation. And a wonderful act that has been enacted by government of Haryana as well as government of Punjab is Haryana Preservation of Subsoil Water Act 2009. So the intention of this study was to see to what extent the act is working effectively, whether there is any improvement or say the same situation is going on and the overexploitation is aggravating. We all know that as per the act, the nursery cannot be made before May 10 and the transplantation cannot be made before, say, June, middle of June. The idea of the act is to align the paddy cultivation which many people consider that the main reason for groundwater overexploitation with the monsoon season. So align the paddy cultivation with the monsoon season so that the huge groundwater pumping that occurs before the monsoon arrives for nursery primarily, that reduces and the raging groundwater overexploitation is tamed. Now, if you see the data between 2004-05 and 2018-19, the paddy cultivated area in those 9 districts has increased from 1.275 million hectare to 1.498 million hectare, and a steady increase. And the groundwater for under groundwater irrigation in 2005-2006, it was 63%. In 2018-19, it increases to 69% in all the 9 districts as a whole. But in certain districts, couple of districts, the groundwater contribution for irrigation is more than 90%. Now, all the 9 districts are overexploited. The stage of groundwater development is more than 100%. And the stage of groundwater development has increased steadily when you consider all the 9 districts as a whole. So, but the range of increase in the stage of groundwater development is most severe in Kurukshetra district. In 2004, it was 166%, and in 2020, it is whooping 246%. So there is a significant increase. And if you see the extraction for irrigation between 2004 and 2013, there is a steady increase for extraction of irrigation. But after 2013, interestingly, there is a decline in extraction for irrigation, particularly in the assessment year of 2017 and 2020. So I mean to say there is an increase of extraction for irrigation between 2004 to 2013. And interestingly, after that, there is a decline. To understand how the Act is working, because it has been implemented in 2009-10, started implementing. So we have analyzed in detail the water level data of 59 wells from 2005 to 2019. The idea is to see how the water level behaved before the Act and how the water level behaved after the implementation of the Act. So the water level were analyzed in 2 domains. One is spatial analysis, one is time domain analysis. Spatial analysis means how the depth to water levels are behaving, and time domain analysis is how the water levels are behaving with time before 2009-10 and after 2009-10. So if we come to the spatial analysis, it is interesting to note that less than 10 meter below groundwater zone, those areas have decreased. And 10 to 20 meter below groundwater, below surface, water level zone, that also has been decreased. So in a nutshell, the shallow water level zone has decreased. And on the contrary, the deeper water level zones in those 9 districts has increased significantly. Like 20 to 30 meter zone, that has increased, and 30 to 40 meter zone has increased significantly during the period of 2005 and 2019. It has increased from 74 square kilometer to 2,807 square kilometer. But when we are coming to the time domain water level analysis, which gives a more accurate insight on what is happening in the aquifers, how the nuts and bolts in the aquifer system is responding to the groundwater extraction and groundwater recharge, the time domain analysis of water level is the best, particularly if you have a reasonably long-term water level data. And very interestingly, it has been found that out of the all wells, post enactment of the Act, that after 2010, 68% were wells who have not shown any improvement, neither in the pre-monsoon trend nor in the post-monsoon trend. But in 32% of the wells, there is an improvement in a sense that the decline of the water level is continuing, but the rate of decline has reduced. There can be other reasons also, but when you are coming and converging the evidence, it indicates that the act that has been implemented is working at least in a good directions. 32% of the wells has shown improvement in the rate of decline between 2005 and 19 after 2010. I repeat, after 2010, and 6 wells, there is a revert in the decline. I mean, the wells which previously used to show decline in water level, now they are showing rise in water level, either in the pre-monsoon, but predominantly in the post-monsoon season. And coming back to the spatial analysis, that after 2015, interestingly, we analyzed from 2005 to 2019. After 2015, the deeper water level zones, they are not expanding as faster rate as before. They are expanding in a less faster rate. That implies that the act is working, particularly in the paddy cultivated area, where groundwater overexploitation is acute, is raging, and at least in localized area, it is impacting groundwater in a more positive way. Similarly, I would request that your Water Resources Authority should take up some studies in different areas and show that the different schemes taken up by government, like Atal Bhujal Yojana also, which has come very recently, that is impacting the groundwater in a more positive way. You know, the most of the studies that come up showing the very gloomy situation, they are basically through the non-invasive technique, like the satellite data, like microgravity data. But our strength is that we have ground data, we have in situ data, and that data tells the real story. So in my opinion, the situation is improving in certain areas, and that should be highlighted so that the workforce who are working day and night to improve the situation in the state government, they also should be encouraged and some positive news comes. Thank you, madam. And thank you all for patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Shah, for your address. You aptly picked up something that was very essential in contemporary times, and that is certainly the rise and then dealing with all the regulation mechanism. And one of them regulation mechanism certainly was the Haryana's preservation of a subsoil water act 2009, and certainly what embedded from that was the rights to policy that you have discussed and deliberated in detail, and how it's impacting in the positive side. Just adding on to where you tried to end up, that with the more rigorous on-field data, we can have more monitoring and more we can come up to the analysis and the situation. Under the Atal Bhujal Yojana, in the area or the region you mentioned, particularly the Kathal, particularly the Kurukshetra, in all these areas, piezometers will be established in each GP, and then all the nuances and all the I will say the trends will be more visible in that terms, and that will help what you argued or what you suggested in there. So with this, thank you, Dr. Saha, for delivering your talk. Now we have our next speaker. I now request Sri Pratul Saxena ji to please come and address his talk. Just in a bit about the Pratul ji. Pratul Saxena ji is at present is Director, National Program Management Unit, Atal Bhujal Yojana. So in a way or other, he is leading us all in a direction that we are all willing to be or enduring to be for the sustainable groundwater governance. And what we are discussing, he's sort of giving some direction to that program at all the states that we are working. Prior to the being a part of the Atal Bhujal Yojana, Mr. Pratul Saxena ji was with the Central Groundwater Board. So with this, now I request you, Mr. Pratul Saxena ji, please, sir, please.
Thank you, Pratik, and good morning to all. It is indeed my privilege and honor to be associated with such distinguished participants in this platform, for giving me a chance to be an expert for giving this talk. So the World Water Day, which is being celebrated since 1993, it focuses on the importance of fresh water and tries to give an enhanced emphasis on raising awareness to around 2.2 billion people who are living without access to safe drinking water. Theme for this year's World Water Day is groundwater, making the invisible visible. As we all know, talking in context of Haryana, around 3 million hectare area is being irrigated through canals. The intensity of canal irrigation is not uniform throughout the state due to skewed distribution of canal water in different commands. This has led to over-dependence on groundwater, with the result that the stage of groundwater extraction in Haryana is around 135%. Out of the 141 assessment units, which in the case of Haryana are blocks, around 85 or 60% are categorized as overexploited, 12 or 8.5% as critical, 14 units, which correspond to 10% as semi-critical, and around 30 units are categorized as safe. Haryana has a unique problem. So while in some areas the groundwater levels are going down, in certain areas there is situation of water logging. Plus, there is also the issue of groundwater contamination, like salinity, fluoride, iron, chloride, and nitrate in a large number of districts of Haryana. Further, higher temperatures and more extreme, less predictable weather conditions are projected to affect the availability and distribution of rainfall, snow melt, river flows, and groundwater. This will further deteriorate the water quality in the state. So the challenges before Haryana are how to maintain its agricultural production and provide safe drinking water to population in the context of depleting groundwater levels, resources, and climate change. So for an institutional perspective, a number of initiatives have been taken by the state government, prominent among them being a ban on early sowing of paddy, constitution of Haryana Water Resources Authority, which has brought about policies of zero liquid discharge and using treated water, wastewater for irrigation and industrial purposes. Haryana has also reconstituted its Command Area Development Authority as Micro Irrigation Command Area Development Authority for renewed emphasis on micro irrigation. They have also launched Mera Pani Meri Virasat, a scheme for crop diversification. However, one thing which urgently needs to be done is the strengthening of the groundwater cell of Haryana. You cannot have governance until you have professionals to give you technical advice. As Pratik has mentioned, I am looking after Atal Bhujal Yojana. So let me talk something about Atal Bhujal Yojana also. So over the last 3 decades, as we all know, rapid expansion in the use of groundwater, primarily for irrigation, has contributed significantly to its agricultural production and overall economic development. This has also resulted in India being the largest groundwater extractor in the world. So sustainable groundwater management aimed at ensuring sufficient groundwater for the future is essential to mitigate such adverse impacts. Decline in the storage and availability of groundwater is likely to adversely affect all sectors of the economy. So with time, government and policymakers have recognized the potential of community-led groundwater management and the need to institutionalize such initiatives through convergence of government schemes with emphasis on demand-side management and behavioral change for ensuring long-term sustainability of groundwater in the country. Atal Bhujal Yojana is a major step in this direction. Present scheme encourages community engagement and inculcates behavioral changes for judicious groundwater management at Gram Panchayat level. This participatory approach is crucial for addressing groundwater challenges in the long run. In fact, this is the first scheme of its kind, which involves community-based planning, monitoring, sharing and use of groundwater data, capacity building of all stakeholders to demystify the complex science of groundwater, community-led groundwater management through a combination of demand-side and supply-side management measures. This scheme is also designed to facilitate sustainable groundwater management by operationalizing a results-oriented approach. This is done through incentivizes behavioral change in the planning, design, and implementation of groundwater-related investments and interventions. Strengthening the institutional and information framework will be a key feature in sustainable groundwater management. Developing a strong base on the extent of the challenges and criticality in addressing them as part of this scheme will pave the way for more reforms in the long run. As under the guidance and leadership of the project coordinators, yes sir, and Dr. Kadian, Haryana has taken great strides for effective implementation of Atal Jal. From a slow start, the institutional framework is in place, the DIPs are on the ground, procurement activities are progressing, water security plans have been prepared, and from what has been shared on social media platforms, information, education, and communication strategy on the ground is clearly working, with Pani Panchayats and community meetings being held across the length and breadth of the state. So, apart from the message of sustainable groundwater management, if the message of improvement in livelihood is also sent across, I think the acceptability of the scheme will be even more. So I would just like to conclude by saying that groundwater is invisible, but its impact is visible everywhere. As climate change gets worse, groundwater will become more and more crucial. We need to work together to sustainably manage this precious resource. Groundwater may be out of sight, but it must not be out of mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saxena, for delivering your talk. One very essential thing that you pointed out during your talk, and that is something inevitable and should be considered at the utmost like urgency, that is the restructuring and reforming the institution, or that are particularly the state institution, towards like taking up their nature towards the groundwater, like the strengthening of what you mentioned as a strengthening of a groundwater cell in one case, and then also like building up the technical capacities, and then reconnecting it with what Keshni ma'am said in her initial thought in the opening address, that is like embedding the interdisciplinary nature, what Atal Bhujal Yojana is saying, how the NPMU and the SPMUs are structured, and then the taking two things like collectively, and then taking the step ahead in the like the restructuring in the nature what is needed in the 21st century. So thank you very much, Mr. Saxena. You had also somehow pointed out the efforts of the Haryana in the Atal Bhujal Yojana, and certainly the efforts taken in the form of the Jal Panchayats, where we had tried to embed the local institution or the local nuances of the society, and then taking up all that towards our new endeavor in the form of the Atal Bhujal Yojana, and it's a successful or the desired implementation in that way. So now, like moving on from here, we will move to our third technical speaker. So in that case, we will have Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni. Dr. Kulkarni will deliver his address. So before I will invite Dr. Kulkarni, I will just give a brief about the Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni. At present, Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni is Executive Director, ACWADAM, Advanced Center for Water and Water Resources and Development and Water Resources Development Management. He was also member drafting committee to India's National Water Policy 2020 that meant to be by the Ministry of Jal Shakti in 2019-2020. He was the chairman working group on the sustainable groundwater management on invitation from the Planning Commission. He was also the member of steering committee on water resources in Planning Commission or the erstwhile Planning Commission in 2010-2011. He is the advisor he's a member in the advisory committee to the water strategy development with the government of Madhya Pradesh, and he was also the part of multiple committees of Central Groundwater Board, Ministry of Jal Shakti, and of the same nature in his a career of last 30 to 35 years in the groundwater domain. So with this, I request Dr. Kulkarni to please deliver his address. So please.
Thank you, Pratik, and good morning to everyone. So I'm not a person for formalities, so let me anyway say a very good morning to all the dignitaries in this meeting, and I would like to straight away jump into my presentation. First of all, apologies. I must, on the lighter side, mention that in the last 40 years, today is really my day in the sun, and by I don't mean individually, but a subject that I have loved, a subject that I have cared for, and a subject that I have fought for to come into the limelight. I know today, for example, the subject itself, the subject of groundwater, is in the limelight for both positive and negative reasons. And having said that, I want to look at it more positively. And therefore, I thought I'll sort of share with you a few slides, which are nothing but a reflection of thoughts, ideas, suggestions, steps forward in the future. Let me just share my screen and see if it works. Okay, there you go. I will need to. Can you see the screen, Pratik?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'll just put it in the slideshow mode.
Please.
There you go. Anyway, and Pratik, I must say that I don't deserve all that you said about me. I think the only introduction I can give about myself is I am still a field hydrogeologist. I work in the field for about 100-150 days a year. And I hope and I would pray on this particular day that the Almighty gives me enough energy and wherewithal to continue doing that more than anything else. So on that note, I thought I'd just quickly talk a little bit about groundwater management and governance, status, challenges, and possible steps ahead. Let me also say that this with a lot of conviction that for me, Atal Bhujal Yojana is one of the most seminal programs in the world, well thought out, and I don't think there is any other national program of this magnitude anywhere in the world. I would say a little late in the coming, but there se lekin durust. Particularly on Atal Bhujal Yojana in Haryana, I have a lot of hopes. And I think with all the sort of challenges, the hurdles that come forth, together we'll be able to conquer and develop something which will be several steps ahead on where we are at the moment on groundwater in India. This is an introduction to the organization that I lead, which I founded about 28 years ago. We work in one of the most hydrogeologically diverse settings in the world. Our entire work is based on partnerships and collaboration, and we work in bringing aquifers and communities as close as possible to each other. And I think that is, to me, one of the core objectives of the Atal Bhujal Yojana. I thought I'd just straight away show you what I have in mind in terms of the key areas for the solution space, because I'm going to talk a little more about challenges in the next few slides. So I think it's important to very, very strongly build up on the concept of managed aquifer recharge. And I think this includes both conservation at large scales and strategic rainwater harvesting. The second important aspect is how are we going to co-manage agriculture, energy, and groundwater? And I think the co-management of agriculture, energy, and groundwater actually holds the key in making programs like the Atal Bhujal Yojana successful. It's important for us to integrate urban groundwater management. I remember a very interesting conversation I had a couple of months ago with Srimati Keshni Anand about her concern on urban groundwater management, because programs like Atal Bhujal Yojana essentially target the rural space. And I think it's important to bring in the context of urban groundwater management to the larger paradigm of groundwater governance in India. Spring shed management, particularly in the hilly and mountainous areas. I just delivered a keynote on the importance of aquifers in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And I think it's extremely important for us to think about the revival of springs, not just in the mountains, but for instance, in even urban spaces where springs are a completely neglected aspect of water management. Bringing in decentralized regulation, social norms, incentive, formal regulation, how do you link these together? The issue of command areas in terms of conjunctive management of surface water and groundwater. And this is something that is, even as I talk, it's a point of discussion for many of our work areas under Atal Bhujal Yojana in Haryana. At a smaller scale, the context of watersheds and groundwater. And at a larger scale, how do we bring in the integration of aquifers at river basin scales? And the last 2 points for me are equally important. I think the science of groundwater must go beyond the very, very restrictive frontiers of putting in sources, wells, drilling wells, the technology of all of that, and move on to also embrace newer areas, because I believe the science of groundwater is important even in issues such as adapting to natural disasters. We've just completed a rapid study in the state of Maharashtra on the hydrogeological significance in landslides, especially, there were thousands of landslides this year in Maharashtra. So, landslides, floods, and droughts. And especially with regard to quality, how do we bring in recycle, reuse, reduce, and also recharge when we think of groundwater? So I spent some time on the solution space. Let me tell you why I think this solution space has become important. Groundwater usage in India goes back thousands of years. If you look at the history of Dholavira, it's about 4,500 years. And in various parts of the country, you can actually find evidences of this usage. Traditional systems of groundwater sourcing, access, and distribution can be dated to at least 2,000 to 3,000 years. And whether it's the Retd or the Chadas in Rajasthan or the moat in Maharashtra, I remember a conversation I was having in a village in Haryana just a couple of months back. And I brought up this issue, and the gentleman, the oldest gentleman in the village, suddenly got so energized when I brought this up and said, wo zamana tha. And I think there is a lesson for us here. And I'll actually tell you a little bit about this lesson as we go along. So the legacy of groundwater until the 19th century, now from say the last 2,000 to 3,000 years until the 19th century, was essentially centered around natural sources like springs or access through Retd. So access was essentially widespread, but from shallow community sources. Dug wells, springs, the canards and karezes of sort of Central Asia or the Middle East. The Retd itself, for me, is a symbol of this access. Extraction was usually human and animal traction. So in some ways, this entire system limited the quantity of groundwater usage. And if you think about it, systems like the Retd actually adopted, whatever you want to call it, the concept of equilibrium, the concept of steady state, which is taught in hydrology, which is taught in hydrogeology, which is taught in engineering, which is taught in social sciences. And I think it integrated all these sciences when we look at this legacy of groundwater usage until the 19th century. Groundwater in India has, to me, been a revolution. And I think increasingly it is revealing itself now, because I believe a lot of contribution to the food and water security in the country, for a growing country and growing in all senses of the word, has been the backbone has been groundwater. I have found the uses of groundwater in some of the most unexpected places, some of the most places with extreme climatic conditions. And the story goes on. So despite the fact that we have a large number of sources of groundwater, whether it's the 40 to 50 odd million wells, whether it's springs in the mountains, is often hidden behind the larger veneer of seen water. I've just I thought this morning about this phrase of the paradox of seen water, large rivers, large reservoirs, glaciers in the mountains, versus the idly-widdly small sources like a borehole or a dug well or a spring in the mountain. And I think this is a paradox that continues to haunt us when we look at sources. Of course, the other paradox which has come to the fore is that of dependency and vulnerability. 37% of districts show groundwater extraction in the overexploited or critical categories, according to the latest assessment. The latest assessment that I had access to was 2017. Nonetheless, I think it's a worrying number. So high dependence, high vulnerability. How do we come to terms with this challenge? And to me, this must be posed as a national challenge, and we must make all our efforts to actually address this challenge by addressing 3 or 4 broad issues. One is the issue of groundwater depletion. Shallower wells that formed a part of a heritage. When wells deplete, it's not just a case of falling water level, it's a loss of heritage. And this is a picture very close to Haryana, just across the border in Nimrana. And there are hundreds and thousands of such old wells which had a management system all gone because of the depletion of the shallow aquifer. Groundwater quality and health. 25% of India's districts today have either 1, 2, or 3 of these problems: fluoride, arsenic, or high salinity groundwater. Not to mention, of course, the biological side of contamination. Drying up of springs. This is, of course, a picture from Kathmandu, but there are pictures which symbolize the drying up of springs and consequently the drying up of rivers. We seldom see the connection between aquifer depletion and drying up of rivers. And I think with the overarching context of climate change, this becomes an issue of national importance. So the pattern of groundwater usage after the 19th century has completely changed. Access over the last 100 years has become more individual, got more privatized through deeper and deeper access to groundwater. Extraction today has come to symbolize high-end pumps that are capable of extracting large volumes of water over short periods of time, often neglecting that there is a behavior of the aquifer which must be taken into consideration. So the demand side, the demand for water has completely overtaken the context of aquifers, the behavior of aquifers, and the natural system with which we must live. I'm not an environmental activist. Neither am I an ecological activist. But I think it's important more than ever before to really realize how an aquifer behaves and how do we live in the framework of aquifer behavior. Because aquifer behavior is inextricably linked to social behavior. And especially as aquifers deplete, groundwater gets contaminated, the issues of inequity, the issues of marginalization, the issues of competition and conflict get more and more deeply ingrained. Plus, we are talking of the deterioration of natural resources, especially the correlation between aquifers and ecosystems. Now, I think the Atal Bhujal Yojana offers us to look at groundwater through a lens that goes beyond the program. I mean, I just picked up these, these are sort of simplified versions of hydrogeological settings in different states. And as you can see, Haryana dominantly alluvial, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat mixed, Maharashtra dominantly green volcanic, and Karnataka dominantly pink, very, very older crystalline systems. So we are dealing with a program that is specific to the aquifer behavior and aquifer understanding. I just brought in Uttarakhand just to give a contrast because the Himalayan systems look very, very different. So I would like to conclude by going back to my solution space with those 8 points, 7 or 8 points that I made, that I think addressing those points would require an integration of, or I would say an intersection of breaking down, by breaking down silos, an intersection of science, praxis, what do you do on the ground, how do you work with communities, and a policy space that recognizes both science and praxis, but also is complementary enough to acknowledge, say, something like community management. And if communities come together, manage their demand, how can they be incentivized in a proper way? So I thought, and for me, this is a message more for myself than for anybody else. I think we must arrive at the context of good groundwater governance. And good groundwater governance is impossible without a reflection on 5 Ps. Principles, especially values and norms around aquifers as common pool resources. Human behavior in terms of managing groundwater is extremely important. So how do you deal with people? How do you deal with human behavior? How do you address tensions, competition, and conflict? By bringing in processes that are participatory, collaborative, and that lead to more cooperative efforts through community decisions and collective action. Practices that embody community decision and collective action must be incentivized. And I think that is where science, praxis, and policy must come together. And policies must, I believe, we must look at policies that help in securing and sustaining good practices and moving away from a classical command and control approach. So with that positive note, and I strongly believe that Atal Jal, especially Atal Jal in Haryana, will try to embody this entire concept of groundwater management, integrated groundwater management and governance as a step forward on this very auspicious day of the World Water Day, but the auspicious day of groundwater. Like I said, my place in the sun for the last 40 years. Thank you again for inviting me. And as long as I'm active, I hope to work with as many people as possible, as many governments as possible, as many organizations as possible to make this dream come true in the next few years. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kulkarni, for giving this fantastic lecture, or I will say largely thoughts to the participants that are like joined us from the field, from the department, from the institutional galleries and everywhere. I just pick up the one thing that you said, like apart from the long talk you said, that certainly was a great, that is the 5 Ps, and that could be a driving sort of I will say the indicator for us as a state while we are implementing in a state level program, and that are certainly the principles, then the people, process, practice, and the policies. So that somehow like the summarize in a nutshell how the capsuled things for the groundwater governance should go ahead, like encompassing all these 5. And as you said, that certainly the Atal Jal and Atal Jal Haryana will see will certainly make some necessary changes or the desired changes. I will just add one more thing to that, and that usually the news stream or the mainstream groundwater like advocate always like somehow that is buried under their thoughts and the process. That is, it is the first time we are trying out something in the alluvial aquifers, and if it succeed in the Haryana, it will be a lesson for the neighboring state in the country, then for the neighboring countries, and it will be for globally, because certainly for the alluvial aquifers, such sort of the ideas in the Pgwm everything yet not implemented to this scale. So thank you once again, Dr. Kulkarni, for giving this talk. Now we will take up a few questions or the few of the thoughts that we had gathered through. In the comment section, we have like somehow get the 2 very important thoughts. One is from our Gurgaon team, and they are suggesting, Dr. Kulkarni, may I request you to please stop your screens here.
I'll just do that. 1 second.
Thank you very much. So one thought that
I'll stop.
Yeah, it stopped.
Yeah.
One thought that we received from our Gurgaon team that are working there, that is like, can we go for the decentralized community-led rainwater rooftop harvesting system where we can encapsulate 5-10 houses and then doing the rainwater harvesting? That is certainly a very essential idea. That is a good thought, food for thought for us in the SPMU and as an Atal Jal. Second thought came from the Kurukshetra, and that came in a way, can we again allow or the legalize the 90 days the paddy cropping that was banned in the Haryana and Punjab few years ago. So apart from this, like in the process, because our DIPs are our foot soldiers, and they are implementing Atal Bhujal Yojana in the states. So in the process of last few weeks, we had gathered few ideas or the thoughts or their questions from them, and now we are posing it to our technical speakers. So Dr. Dipanker Saha, it is for you. This thought we came like repetitively, or this question or queries came repetitively from the areas that you just spoke about in your talk, that is Kurukshetra. And their question is, in the half of the year, all the land are waterlogged, and at the same time, their aquifers are depleted. So how, like during the implementation, while we are planning an implementation, how we should like intervene, or like how we should look at the dual program of water logging at the one time, and the water depletion or the depleted aquifer at the same time. So Dr. Dipanker Shah, this is for you, if you will please like address this question. This is from our Kurukshetra team. Dr. Saha, can you hear me?
Oh, Dipanker is on mute, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so in meantime, we are like connecting with the Dr. Shah. We have a second sort of thought or the question, and Dr. Kulkarni, this is for you. And this largely came from across the state. Everyone we had talked in our DIPs and everyone. Their question is, while they are interacting with the community, and what you had also presented in your the presentation, that we carry the science along with us during the intervention. So their question is how we take up the science or science of the groundwater or the hydrogeology to the community, how we should like convey the technicalities to the community during like their involvement, their participation and their planning. So Dr. Kulkarni, this is for you, like your thoughts on this, please.
Yes, Pratik. So it's actually difficult to answer that question, but if I reflect on our own experience at ACWADAM, I think first and foremost, if the community is involved in collecting the science, I think one of the big mistakes we make always is we put science in silos and we say that, okay, there's an expert organization that does the science and the results of that science must be communicated with the community. So I think using the context of communities, if there is a convergence of the scientific understanding developed by a community with the more conventional understanding that comes from a scientific body, I think this is where terms of agreement can be reached. One of the problems with science, and it's not just about the science of groundwater, it's a problem with all sciences across the world, is the mystification of the science itself. So I think communication is a lot about demystification. Communication is a lot about trust. And if, for example, the community is involved in local mapping of aquifers, which is in complementarity to what we have as aquifer mapping data, I think this will actually provide a pathway for way forward. My second point is about the agents of change. So in the Atal Bhujal Yojana, I believe the agents of change are the DIPs. And the DIPs therefore must also go a little beyond their mandate of community mobilization, because community mobilization on groundwater is a little more technical, is a little more socially challenging than any other community mobilization. And I mean, we probably need 1 hour to debate and discuss this, but let me say this with a lot of conviction that unless the DIPs are prepared to be able to demystify, to be able to do a little bit of science with the help of communities, I think things will change. A last point which just struck me is this process is not easy. And this process cannot be seen in black and white in terms of targets. The process has to be outcome-based because it is a point of negotiation. I mean, you talked about the example of paddy, or you talked about the example of collectivization around rainwater harvesting. People usually come together when you come with a solution of pani badhao, pani ko badhao, augment water. People don't come together when you say to them that you need to share your water or you need to regulate your water. And I think this part of the negotiation is very crucial. And I think the DIPs need to be enabled to actually conduct this kind of a negotiation. Maybe you won't achieve the final goal, but you at least get to some kind of a golden mean through this negotiation. So I think with that, I'll stop. I hope I've tried to address at least a bit of your part of your question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kulkarni, for giving a thought to it. So we are again joined by Dr. Dipanker Saha. Dr. Saha, for the benefit of you and for everyone, I will just repeat a question. So from our field team, we had from the Kurukshetra, we had received a thought or a query. Actually, you had also talked about the Kurukshetra and that region. So our DIP, they are our foot soldier in the field, and they had asked in the process of their implementation and planning, they are facing one very critical problem. That at the same time the region and the geography is waterlogged, and at the same time that area is also groundwater depleted or the aquifers are depleting. So how to see this duality of the problem or the dual nature of the problem, or in a way, or the dual circumstances in the same time, then how to go for the intervention considering this, please. Dr. Shah, you are on mute, please.
Yeah. As I understand, what they are telling in Kurukshetra, they are getting water logging also and deep water level also. Are they getting in the same village? Because they are primarily targeting the village level water security plan.
Agree. Yeah, they are facing in the same villages.
So if the water logging and water scarcity is reported from the same village, I mean, considering the boundary of a village, it will be very curious. I am curious to know where it is. Maybe I will interact with them 1:1. Say, first of all, if there is a water logging, in what we find in the Palwal Kurukshetra, the water loggings are associated with saline water. The soil is saline, the water is saline, and there is water logging, and the water logging is originating from the canal command area. But in Kurukshetra, in which part they are telling? Let me interact with them. Which part they are telling?
It's in the parts of the Pehua and the Ladwa block.
In Pehua block, if they are getting any water logging, that must be due to some parched aquifer, and that must be localized. Okay, that must be a localized phenomena, because by and large, the entire Kurukshetra is highly overexploited. Exactly. And if that is originating from the canal, the water logging is originating from they are located in the canal command area and originating from large seepage taking from the unlined canal, then their intervention should be different to minimize the canal seepage in those areas. That must be. Then only the level can be reclaimed. And another issue is coming, that even if some area is water logging in your DIP, I mean in your village water security plan, is there any provision of pumping of water? You see, can they recommend pumping out of groundwater and shifting it into the deficit areas? That provision must be made. So my point is, if there is water logging in Kurukshetra, it must be very localized. It may be due to the parched water aquifer. They must see in detail how much area is affected, and in all probability it is causing because of the seepage from the canal, unlined canal or broken lined canal. They should take care of those seepage and properly recommend. And if required, the pumping should also be recommended for the from the waterlogged areas. Those are my points.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Shah. One thing I like as a takeaway that what you said, you will be happy to interact and you should be happy to deliberate more onto this through the field visits or the understanding the actual situation. We take up that as a note and we'll do the needful onto this. So thank you much, Dr. Shah, for your thought onto that. So now we will move ahead with our as per the agenda. So there is an last minute cancellation from Dr. Satbir Singh Kadian, Project Director, Atal Bhujal Yojana, Haryana, due to some family medical emergency. So we apologize to all our participants for this last minute change. Now I request Mr. Sumit SDO, Atal Bhujal Yojana, for the vote of thanks. Sumit, please.
Very good morning to all. It gives me an immense pleasure and honor to deliver the vote of thanks for this valuable event in front of all the dignitaries. I would like to thank Mrs. Keshni Anand Arora, Chairperson HWRA, for delivering the opening address and setting the desired tone for the day. I'm also thankful to our distinguished technical speakers for this webinar, Mr. Pratul Saxena, Director NPMU, Dr. Himanshu Kulkarni, Executive Director ACWADAM, and Dr. Dipanker Saha, former member CGWB. The technical sessions had explicitly spotlighted the potential challenges, the probable possibilities, the institutional perspective in context of Haryana to achieve the global goal of sustainable groundwater governance. Madam, sir, your thoughts were very inspiring and will surely make groundwater visible from being invisible in practice as well as in actions. I would also like to thank Shri Pramod Jain, Executive Engineer, entire TSA team, DPMU experts for making this event interactive and well organized. I'm also thankful to all the participants for sparing your valuable time and thoughts. Once again, thank you all for making this event a success. And here we close this event with the promise and hope of converting the valuable thoughts delivered here to results, and thereby making the next World Water Day 2023 even grander. Thank you.
Thank you, Smith, for like the vote of thanks. And with this, we conclude. Thank you all. Thank you for being the part of this webinar by Atal Bhujal Yojana Haryana. Thank you all. Please. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.